There is a persistent idea, often repeated in modern self-help circles, that we must create our own meaning, as if life were a blank canvas where everything depends only on our will, our creativity, our desires. But Viktor Frankl, by going through the unspeakable horrors of the concentration camps, showed us something different, deeper, and, in a way, more liberating. Meaning is not something you invent. It is something you find. Imagine for a moment that life is not a raw material waiting to be forcibly molded by our hands, but rather a kind of subtle enigma, a complex jigsaw puzzle in which each piece already exists, scattered, hidden, shuffled. And our role is not to manufacture these pieces, but to discover them, recognize them, fit them together with patience, humility, and courage. This change in perspective is radical because it takes us from the position of sovereign creators to the position of attentive seekers. Life ceases to be a stage where everything revolves around our desires and reveals itself as a vast, mysterious field in which we are called to listen to something that surpasses us, a call that comes from outside but resonates within. Frankl said that life always asks a question, and it is up to us to provide the answer, and not the other way around. It is no longer about, what do I want from life? But what does life want from me now? Meaning, therefore, is not something subjective in the trivial sense of the word. It has its own objectivity. It is in the world, in the events, in the people who cross our path, in the challenges that arise. Life, as he said, is like a dialogue. And in this dialogue, we are the interlocutors, not the authors of the script, but those who respond authentically to what existence proposes. This is why, for Frankl, suffering can have meaning, not because it is desirable, but because even in the deepest pain, there can be a why that allows us to endure anyhow. Those who understand that meaning is found, not invented, are able to look chaos in the eye and still glimpse a thread of purpose. This is a truth that emerges, especially when everything we thought was essential is taken away from us, when we lose our comfort, our plans, our dreams. It was precisely in the concentration camp that Frankl realized this. When nothing else remained, there was still the possibility of choosing one's attitude towards pain, and therein lay a meaning, a calling, a possible answer. Life is constantly giving us signs, clues, silent opportunities. The meaning is there, not within our will, but within reality. It is up to us to have the courage to listen, to seek, to recognize. For deep down, every human being is a pilgrim, not of himself, but of a purpose that awaits him somewhere along the way. If we stop for a moment, if we silence the noise of obligations, notifications, and external voices that demand so much of us, we will notice something subtle, almost imperceptible, but profoundly transformative. Each situation in life is, in itself, an invitation. Not a common invitation, but a singular, unrepeatable call that summons us to a specific response. And that response can only come from us. This idea, so dear to Viktor Frankl, radically changes the way we see events. There are no empty days. There are no neutral moments. Every encounter, every loss, every silence, every pain, every joy, every dilemma, they all carry within them a question that is asked exclusively to us. It is as if life, in its mysterious ways, communicates through the folds of routine and tells us, gently or brutally, and now what are you going to do with this? Frankl experienced this in extreme terms. He observed that even in the face of the brutality of the concentration camps, situations that seemed merely absurd or meaningless, the cold, the hunger, the separation from loved ones, the constant fear of death, contained silent invitations to dignity, compassion, and inner resilience. These were not easy invitations, of course, but they were real. And when one accepted this invitation, even for a moment, one's soul was illuminated with something the external world could not destroy: meaning. The great secret, perhaps, is to understand that the invitation does not always come in the form of a glorious opportunity. Often, it presents itself as a setback, a failure, a prolonged wait. And yet in these dark places, life continues to call us. Because the invitation is not in the circumstances themselves, but in the possibility of responding to them with authenticity. That's why Frankl said that every moment is irreplaceable. It brings a unique chance for fulfillment that will never come again. Life challenges us differently every second, and our job is to be vigilant, to be present, to notice what is being asked of us here, now, and to act accordingly. That might mean hugging someone, keeping quiet when everything inside us screams, forgiving when hurt is tempting, moving forward when fear tells us to stop. Every gesture can be the right answer to an invisible invitation. This is the kind of perspective that transforms ordinary life into something extraordinary. Because suddenly, even washing the dishes, navigating traffic, dealing with a difficult colleague, or facing grief gains depth. Everything becomes sacred when seen as an invitation from existence, a call to be who you are, at your best, right, on the stage where you are. And so, by accepting what is given to us with courage and responsibility, we become what we are destined to be. Not just survivors of circumstances, but partners in the mystery of life. At the heart of Viktor Frankl's doctrine is a powerful, silent idea, almost scandalous to the modern mind, that sees itself as a victim of circumstances. No matter how much everything is taken from us, possessions, people, status, security, there still remains something that no one can take away from us: the freedom to choose our response. This is, according to Frankl, the last of human freedoms, and perhaps the most sacred. Imagine yourself in the worst of situations. Everything you love is gone. Your physical freedom is limited. You are pushed into the abyss of despair. The question that arises, and one that many have asked in the darkness of their own prisons, whether visible or invisible, is, do I still have any power? And the answer, which seems almost absurd at first glance, is yes, you have the power to choose your attitude. Frankl saw this in the concentration camps, amid human degradation, where the body was treated as something disposable. The spirit rose in some with an unshakable dignity. He saw prisoners sharing their last piece of bread, comforting others, refusing to allow the brutality around them to contaminate their inner selves. These people were, he said, living proof that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom. This small gap, this space between what happens to us and how we react, is where all our humanity takes place. It is in this space that we decide who we are, not in words but in practice. We may not control what happens, but we always control how we face it. And this decision, often invisible to the eyes of the world, is where true heroism lies. Frankly, does not deny suffering, nor does he try to spiritualize it with naive romanticism. He knows the real weight of pain, but he courageously asserts that human beings are more than the sum of their traumas, that there is a spark within us that can say yes or no to what is happening, and this choice is the basis of everything. Perhaps in practice, this means choosing not to react with anger when someone offends us. It means keeping faith in the midst of despair. It means not becoming bitter even when you have reason to be. Or even more courageously, accepting what cannot be changed without giving in to cynicism. This freedom is demanding because it takes us out of the position of passive victims and invites us to be the authors of our responses. But it is also what restores our dignity, even in the most degrading situations. As Frankl said, man can preserve a vestige of spiritual freedom, of mental independence, even under terrible conditions of psychic and physical stress. The freedom to choose our response does not exempt us from pain, but it does prevent us from being reduced to it. And that in itself is a form of redemption. Ultimately, we are not determined by our circumstances. We are revealed by them. And in this space where we decide how to respond, we are invited not just to survive, but to become who we truly are. There comes a time when sooner or later we are all taken to a dark place, not by choice, but by force of life. It could be the loss of someone, the collapse of a dream, an illness, an injustice, and in that place where everything seems mute and formless, where even time seems suspended, a silent, almost desperate question is born. Why is this happening to me? It is at this very point that Viktor Frankl steps in with a light, not a light that dispels all darkness, but one that allows us to see into it. For Frankl, suffering is inevitable, but despair is not. And the difference between the two lies in the meaning. He saw in the concentration camps that those who were able to give meaning to suffering were able to endure what seemed unbearable. And this is not a philosophy of comfort. It is something lived, breathed, experienced in the flesh, in the bones, in the spirit. If there is a why, any how can be born. This phrase, which he inherited from Nietzsche, becomes in his mouth an embodied truth. But be careful. This is not about seeking suffering. Frankl does not romanticize pain, nor does he suggest that we should seek it as a path to enlightenment. What he proposes is something more subtle, more honest. When suffering finds us, and we cannot avoid it, we can still decide how to deal with it. And that is when, paradoxically, suffering becomes a possibility of growth, of deepening, of transcendence. Think of it as a steep mountain. No one climbs it for the pure pleasure of it. There's pain, effort, exhaustion. But when we reach the top, something in us has changed, not just because we've seen the view, but because the climb has shaped us. So it is with the human soul. Certain inner heights can only be reached by passing through dark valleys. And what guides us through these valleys is the ability to transform pain into a mission. For Frankl, there is a type of response that only suffering can extract from us. A maturity that does not come from success, but from loss. An empathy that is born not from comfort, but from an open wound. There are those who find their purpose precisely by going through suffering. People who have lost someone and decided to help others overcome the same pain, who have faced cancer and started to live with a new intensity, who have been betrayed and learned to love more consciously. It's true. We don't always understand the meaning right away. Sometimes it only reveals itself much later. Sometimes it shows itself not in words, but in actions, in who we become after the impact. But Frankl assures us suffering doesn't have to be a dead end. It can be a gateway to interiority, to faith, to compassion, a call to rise above ourselves. For even when everything falls apart, the way we choose to navigate the ruin can itself be an act of meaning. And that is what saves, not the absence of pain, but the certainty that no pain, no matter how absurd it may seem, is incapable of being transformed into something greater. Sometimes in silence, sometimes with tears, but always with dignity. Viktor Frankl, with the wisdom of someone who saw the human soul at its lowest point, but also at its highest, teaches us that the meaning of life is not an impenetrable mystery, a revelation reserved only for the enlightened or the great thinkers. On the contrary, meaning is available to everyone, anywhere, at any time, and it can be found basically in three ways, three doors, three paths. 1. By what we do, the path of works, creations, achievements. This is the most visible path. We find meaning when we dedicate ourselves to something worthwhile, when we create work, create value, and contribute to the world around us. It could be a great work of art, a career in medicine, an ethically built company, or even a carefully cultivated garden. The scale doesn't matter. What matters is the commitment to something that transcends us. Frankl saw this in the prisoners who, even surrounded by death, cleaned their shoes, wrote on pieces of paper, swept the floor of the barracks, as if to say, I can still do something meaningful, even here. The work does not need to be grand in the eyes of the world. It just needs to be meaningful to the person doing it, because when we put our hearts into what we do, the work stops being a burden and becomes a mission. 2. For what we live, the path of experiences, of love, of beauty. There is meaning in what we experience deeply, in moments of presence, in human bonds, in true encounters. When we love someone, when we listen to music that touches us, when we contemplate a landscape that makes us feel part of the whole, there lies the meaning. Frankl was emphatic. Love is the highest and ultimate goal to which a human being can aspire. It is through love, for a person, for a cause, for a place, that our lives often find their anchor. In prison, he found meaning only in thinking about his wife, without knowing if she was still alive. It was love, pure and unconditional, that kept him together. That is the beauty of the second path. Even without being able to do anything, we can still experience something or someone deeply. 3. By the way we face suffering, the path of attitude towards the inevitable. This is the hardest path and perhaps the most transformative. When we can no longer change our circumstances, we can still transform ourselves in response to them. It is at this moment that profound dignity emerges, the kind that no tragedy can erase. Choosing a courageous, compassionate, resilient attitude in the face of pain is perhaps the most silently powerful gesture a human being can make. Frankl is not talking about conforming, but about rising above, about not allowing suffering to destroy us from within, about using pain as a call to inner greatness. Thus, even what seems absurd can be integrated into a narrative of meaning, not because pain is good, but because we choose to respond to it nobly. These are the 3 paths, 3 doors that life continually offers us. It is not necessary to follow them all at the same time. Sometimes one will be closed, but another will be wide open. The important thing is to know that meaning is always available, like an underground stream waiting for the soul to pierce the earth and drink from it. Frankl teaches us finally that life never ceases to have meaning. It is we who sometimes fail to look for it in the right places. Imagine for a moment that life is not a monologue, but a silent and profound dialogue, the kind that is not only made with words, but with gestures, circumstances, encounters, losses, silences. Frankl invites us to look at existence as a kind of constant conversation between us and something greater, something that calls us, challenges us, provokes us to respond. It's a radical paradigm shift. Life is not happening against us or indifferent to us. It is speaking to us. The question is, have we been listening? This is perhaps one of Frankl's most beautiful insights. He saw life as a living question, which at every moment presents us with a new situation, a decision to make, a pain to understand, a joy to celebrate. And on each of these occasions, something is asked of us, not explicitly, but with a clarity that only those who are still can perceive. What will you do with it? How will you respond to this loss? And now, what does your love, your courage, your conscience have to say? Note that this is not about seeking a right answer in the moralistic sense, but about seeking an authentic answer, one that comes from the most lucid and responsible part of ourselves. Frankl believed that we are questioned by life, and not the other way around. It's not about asking life to explain everything to us, but about recognizing that it is asking us something, and it's up to us to respond accordingly. This dialogue with life happens in the small details. Sometimes a loss doesn't come to punish us, but to teach us to let go. Sometimes a difficulty is a provocation to become stronger, more patient, more truthful. Dialogue isn't always easy to understand. It requires attentive listening, sensitivity, presence. But it's there. It's always been there. And here comes an almost sacred aspect. Each person receives different questions from life. No one is called in the same way. While one is challenged by loneliness, another is tested by excessive responsibilities. While one needs to learn to act, the other needs to learn to wait. And for this, there are no ready-made formulas. What there is an honest openness to recognize. What I am experiencing now is a question. How am I going to answer it? This way of living transforms everything, because even in the most trivial moments, like a delay, a difficult conversation, an unexpected opportunity, we realize that something bigger is looking us in the eye and saying, "You are part of this. You matter. Your response matters." And the most impressive thing, life responds back. When we give a truthful answer, the world changes color, sometimes with something subtle, sometimes with an unexpected piece, or with a synchronicity that seems magical. Because, like any good dialogue, the conversation with life is built in two directions. Therefore, Viktor Frankl invites us to live with listening, with courage, and with presence. Life is not a fixed script, nor a battle against chance. It is a call, an exchange, a mutual movement. And when we begin to live as those who listen, as those who respond, then everything, absolutely everything, can become a path. We live in a world that tells us subtly from the beginning, you are what you were made of. The experiences you have had, the culture you were born into, the traumas you have endured, the environment you grew up in. Everything seems to point to the same conclusion. You are a product, a result, a reflection of the world around you. But Viktor Frankl, with his courageous lucidity, comes to break this logic. He states, with the authority of someone who has faced hell and survived with dignity, that the human being is not a product. He is a calling. Yes, you are a calling, not an object passively shaped by circumstances, but a being summoned by life to fulfill itself in a unique way. There is something that only you can be, something that only you can offer the world. And the beauty of this calling is that it is not behind you, but before you. You are not what they did to you. You are what you decide to do with what they did to you. This is the difference between a product and a call. The first is passive, the second, free. Frankl saw this in the worst human contexts. Men reduced to numbers, treated as commodities, stripped of everything, and yet some kept their heads high, their souls whole, their hearts compassionate. These people were not just surviving, they were responding to an inner calling that no concentration camp could silence. And you? Where is your listening? Where is that voice that calls you, behind the masks, the obligations, the expectations of others? Because it is there, maybe muffled by fear, maybe forgotten by fatigue, but it is there. It whispers, you are not just another one. You are not here by chance. There is something that only you can answer. Frankl insists we are not defined by external factors, but by our ability to give a free and personal response to what happens to us. That is why, even in the face of suffering, failure, chaos, we are still beings called upon, not only to survive, but to give meaning to life. This vision simultaneously empowers us and makes us responsible, because by ceasing to be a product, we lose the alibi of victimhood. But we gain something infinitely greater, the chance to live as protagonists, as active voices in dialogue with the world. Don't wait for someone or something to give you your role. There is no external formula. Life will not hand you a printed map, but it calls you every day, in every situation, to make your existence a work that will not be repeated. And this work is not what the world makes of you. It is what you choose to be, in spite of the world. There are times when life seems to scream no with brutal force. No to your desire, no to your dream, no to your love, your health, your stability, your hope. It is in these moments, precisely in these moments, that Viktor Frankl proposes something radical, something that defies our immediate logic, but that echoes as an almost sacred truth. You can still say yes, not a conformist yes, not a resigned yes, but an essential yes. A yes that affirms one's own life. Frankl is not talking about superficial optimism, the kind that pretends everything will work out. He is talking about an inner choice to remain whole even when everything around you is falling apart. To affirm that, despite everything, life is still worth living. This yes does not come from circumstances, it comes from the depths of one's being. Frankl himself experienced it. He tells us, for example, that in the concentration camp, as he was leaving one freezing dawn for another day of forced labor, he looked up at the sky and saw a cloud tinged red by the rising sun. And at that moment, with no one around, exhausted and hungry, he murmured, with what was left of his inner voice, yes to life despite everything. It is this kind of yes that transforms suffering into dignity, that refuses to be swallowed by the absurd, that lifts the soul even when the body is on the ground. Saying yes to life when it seems to say no is an act of spiritual resistance. It's affirming that you are greater than what happened to you, that there is something in you that the world cannot destroy. It's remaining human in the midst of inhumanity. It's maintaining faith in the possibility of meaning, even without seeing it completely. Maybe this yes appears in the simple act of getting out of bed on a difficult day, or in the effort to listen to someone patiently even when you are exhausted, or in the silent gesture of not giving up on yourself. This is a kind of prayer without words, a fidelity to one's own existence, even when it seems not to reciprocate. And according to Frankl, this is exactly when life reveals to us who we are. Because it is easy to love life when it smiles at us, but to love life when it hurts us, that is freedom, that is transcendence, that is courage. And often it is in this unlikely yes, in this yes torn from the soul in the midst of pain, that the spark of true meaning is born. At the heart of human experience, there is a question that echoes incessantly. What is the meaning of my life? Many people look for ready-made answers, magic formulas, scripts handed down by others. But Frankl, who lived and reflected deeply on this search, reminds us that the responsibility for this answer is entirely ours. You are solely responsible for finding and creating the meaning of your life. This is not a light burden. It is a weight that can often feel overwhelming, but it is also the ultimate expression of human freedom. Because unlike animals, we are not guided solely by instinct or blind adaptation. We are beings who can choose, and choose consciously, how to respond to what life presents us. Frankl says that we cannot choose the circumstances of our life, but we can always choose the attitude with which we face them. This choice is our most personal work, which no one else can do for us. You are not a passive spectator of your destiny, but an active author. Every action, every decision, every thought you cultivate contributes to this ongoing creation of meaning. And here is the crucial point. There is no fixed and universal meaning. Meaning is always personal, concrete, unique. It is what gives meaning to your own existence. Therefore, no one can replace you in this process. Not family, not friends, not leaders, not philosophers. Each of us must take on this responsibility without running away, without blaming, without expecting life to make sense on its own. Frankl emphasizes that assuming this responsibility does not mean being alone, quite the opposite. It is in this act that we find our greatest strength. Because when we recognize that we are responsible, we also recognize our ability to change, to grow, to respond to life's call. And this responsibility opens the door to hope. It tells us that even in the face of adversity, pain, or failure, we can always start over, redirect, redefine the direction we choose to follow. You can be, at any moment, the author of a new chapter. Thus, responsibility for meaning is not a burden that paralyzes us, but an opportunity that liberates us. It frees us from being victims of circumstances and makes us conscious protagonists of our destiny. If there is one thing that Viktor Frankl makes clear to us, it is that the meaning of life is not a hidden treasure that once found guarantees us eternal happiness and answers to everything. The meaning of life lies precisely in the search, in the journey, in the continuous effort to find and reaffirm that which gives meaning to existence. Life does not hand us meaning on a silver platter. It invites us to seek it, often with effort, doubts, new beginnings, and failures. And it is in this movement that true value lies. Frankl compares this quest to a mission. Not a straight line, but a path with curves, detours, and sometimes stumbles. Each step taken, each choice made, each moment lived with awareness and responsibility is a piece of this great mosaic. And even when meaning seems to elude us, when life seems chaotic and without answers, it is the search itself that keeps us alive, attentive, connected to something greater. Because as long as there is searching, there is hope. As long as there is questioning, there is possibility. It is as if meaning were not a fixed point, but a dynamic flow, a dance between the human being and life. It is in the act of searching that life reveals itself. It is in the courage to continue asking, even without clear answers, that human beings find fulfillment. This vision frees us from the burden of having to figure it all out now. It welcomes us into the imperfection of the journey, into constant learning, into a daily commitment to what is most true for us. And it invites us to embrace uncertainty with courage, because that is where meaning blossoms. Thus, the meaning of life is not a destination to be reached, but a path to be lived. A permanent invitation to be present, to choose, to respond, to be who we truly are as time unfolds. And this is Viktor Frankl's ultimate and most profound message. Life is calling you to something, and that something is the authentic search for meaning, which is unique and irreplaceable in each of us.